Hello everyone, Noah here, and just recording a different type of content today. I'm working on this here sporadically where I can. I spent a little bit of time last week working on it, and I spent some time today working on it. I made a community post about this build. We got shopkeeper here, whole attic up here. Some of this stuff. Sort of meant to have like old Victorian era kind of, but also like a little bit of Dieselpunk stuff. Admittedly, there's not really much machinery, but it's sort of like grayer. Yeah, a little bit grayer build style, I guess. I don't typically build like this. I mean, but then again, I don't exactly necessarily always have an exact build style, though I do enjoy building like a lot of temples and stuff like that. But I had an idea in my head that I thought it would be cool to like try writing a Blades in the Dark campaign in Minecraft, or really just any TTRPG for that matter. But Blades felt like the best first choice because I've been wanting to work with it for a while, and I was like, I feel like I could probably run this on stream or something, and then it would be really cool to try and make a Minecraft world based around it. So this is sort of me testing the waters outside of the community post, because I know it's not exactly something that has as much views as like a normal video. So I'm gonna try and build, or at least start building a house or something, some sort of building to go here. This is more or less just a testing world. Although, if you guys like this world, this could be the world that I end up using for the video series, if I end up making it. If you guys want to see a video series like that, like a series of streams, my thought process is working in like having it be so, I don't know, maybe I'd open up the slots to subscribers and have you guys be able to like fill out a Google form if you want to participate, and I'll take like the first 3 or 4. My thought process is probably at the having 4 players. Here's in this, 3 or 4 players is a nice number to work with. I can work with 5 too, but Blades is a little bit different, I will say, than D&D. It's a fiction-first game. I am still getting used to playing in Java. I don't play as often as I would like because I spend a lot of my day hours doing schoolwork. I played a little bit over last summer with one of my buddies, but I really don't play as much as I would like, which is weird because one of the things that I'm known for amongst my friend group is my ability as a Minecraft builder. Or it was sort of one of the big, people came to me for building advice. I even ran the competition show of sorts in the vein of Lego Masters called Blockbenders. Yeah, that series didn't exactly end up taking off, and the stuff in the friend group meant that yeah, sort of ended up shutting down. It was kind of a bummer. We never ended up getting everyone back together to do a new season. I mean, we tried to, and then it just sort of didn't end up happening. Then scam hit. We were worried that I was worried that I might have gotten hacked on Discord. Because one of my buddies had, and then I ended up getting a suspicious message, which in retrospect I really should have recognized. As far as I've been given reason to believe, I am fine. And it's been several months and nothing has happened to suggest to me that I'm not. But you know, yeah, I mean, it was already relatively silent in that group anyways. Yeah. But I will say one thing that I do miss. It's been so long since I've actually just sat down and built something for an extended period of time in Minecraft. For a little bit, one of my buddies and I, we wanted to try and this was this was a little bit before he hooked me up with Java. I wasn't actually able to buy it myself. Off the weird ways with how my Microsoft account is, I still don't entirely know what was preventing me. But yeah, he ended up helping me out. He hooked me up with it. I'm gonna move this over. That being said, since we are talking about a world that I'm sort of building with potential for TTRPG use in mind, I think then it only makes sense that I talk about why I think building out a world map early before you necessarily have everything figured out can be a good idea. So, by the way, this is entirely not scripted. I did not plan this on the fly. I just was trying to figure out something to do, and I was looking through my Steam library. Like, do I want to play a game? What do I want to do? So it's spring break for me right now, and I just sort of need something to do. And I was like, let's just boot up Minecraft and go. Let's see what I come up with, and I was like, you know what? Let's record it too while I'm at it, because why not, right? Yeah, totally. So yeah, lo and behold, that's what we're doing. Okay. So yeah, why might building out your campaign world ahead of time be a good idea? Well, first thing I want to specify that if you're don't start building out your campaign world if you don't know what you want to be running in it. Because then it does you absolutely no good to have a world if you realize, oh, I don't feel passionate about what I'm making it for. Whether you be drawing it on a map like I typically do, or building it in something like Minecraft or Hytale like I'm doing right now. It can be good to build it in something like this to get all of your thoughts together. But this isn't a substitute for actual, like, starting on writing the whole thing. And you do sort of need to start. Or first, you need to sort of have a general sense of the groundwork that you're laying. Because otherwise, then, and even if you're really proud of what you have for that particular world, it's kind of worthless if it's not something that, when you put it into like campaign context setting, and if it's something that you're not necessarily happy with, that you don't necessarily think you'd want to actually run, you need to sort of think about on the lens of, like, is this something that I as a player would want to, that I would want to run as a DM, or I would want to play it as a player, or is this the sort of story that I want to tell? And I think that's something that can kill a lot of campaigns. Getting all caught up in the, hey, I want to make this cool thing. Okay, but are you passionate about it? Is it something that you'd actually want to run for people? Is it something that you'd actually want to sit down and devote your time towards? Or is it just sort of what you felt like drawing then? Because what you felt like drawing then isn't necessarily going to be what you feel like running now. Oh, if that makes sense. Like, you can spend your time building out a world, sure. But all that world building is worth nothing if you aren't actually passionate about the world that you're building. And so, really, your first question should be, do I like this? Is this something that I feel passionate about? Is this something that I would want to run? And if the answer is no, then you need to pivot. But if the answer is yes, then maybe then this is the thing for you to try with the world, with the story or whatever. As for me, the whole reason I knew, hey, this is what I want to run, is because I've been wanting to run a Blaze in the Dark campaign for a while. It just never really gotten a good opportunity to do so. So now I'm sort of making that opportunity with this project. Whether or not I end up fully committing to this, I have no idea. But I'm passionate about the kind of story that Blades allows you to tell. Oh, I want to try and... Well, I always sort of found some of the concepts cool. Well, especially with the way that the gameplay itself is. When I first learned about the game, I didn't actually know all that much, and I wasn't super duper passionate about it. Because I just was sort of like, oh, it's a thief game. And then I found it in my college library. And I read the book, and I was like, oh wow, there's a lot of depth into this, and it feels like such a nice departure from what I was used to with Dungeons and Dragons. Because I love Dungeons and Dragons, don't get me wrong, but man, as a system, it kind of just sucks. Like, it's very much, it's unbalanced, it's crunchy. It can be fun to play with, yeah, but also can be just a bit of a pain to work with too. Sort of want to run a campaign where I'm not really worried about, like, oh, is my player going to do this game-breaking thing, or have the potential to do this game-breaking thing, which is constantly the case, which is sort of kind of a constant concern that I sort of have to have, because I have a min-maxer, I have her, well, not so much min-maxer, it's just a guy with anime power fantasy. If he's watching this, he knows exactly who he is. Yeah, I'm not gonna call him out by name, but yeah, dude, come on. Yes, I know I can fly. I'm not going to. I'm gonna actually make this a bit of a challenge on myself. Also, I just don't like the way the Java's flying controls are. But then again, that might just be me being used to Pocket Edition and Bedrock. Really just Bedrock in general. Well, Java's relatively new for me still. For the longest time, I spent I built solely in Pocket Edition. I don't know how much of an eye twitch that is for some people. But I was able to do quite a bit in there, though, so I was never really bothered by it too much, but I had always sort of wanted to get my hands on Java, so that way I could do stuff like mods, and lo and behold, the time I got it, though, yeah, at the time I got Java, though, it was like at the worst time to start getting mods, because like the content drops are out and all that stuff, and it's like, oh, now there's a new update almost every other month, and I don't play often enough to where I can have enough time to make all the mods that I have worth it. I don't really have a ton. I just sort of have a few like optimization mods and shaders and stuff like that. Also Axiom, which was Axiom flight controls are so much easier than Minecraft Java flight controls. I can't use Axiom's a majority of Axiom's features for the life of me. But I can use the flight controls just fine, and I can use like the extrude tool and stuff. But like I have very little knowledge of it, and I probably should watch that Ashes Den tutorial on it at some point. Funny thing, for like the longest time, I had sort of been like, it'd be really cool if I could get enough attention to like join the Torture Nexus and stuff, but I'm getting distracted, so I won't go too heavy into that whole essentially unrealistic fantasy. If you have any idea of what I'm talking about, then cool. But if you don't stress it. So nice. Yeah. Support structure. This one. It's just sort of there. It's the door. Funny how this one sort of originally started as intended to be a support structure, and then it just stopped being a support structure. These things happen. It's going to be a really interesting build. Oh, yeah. Probably not here. Yeah. That's probably the better choice. Tell you, I haven't actually used any doors in this whole thing. There we go. Yeah, right now I'm sort of just building houses along like the harbor, like what I'd sort of expect to see. Yeah, I think I don't know. I'm sort of just winging it. Okay, but there's nothing wrong with that if you're just sort of trying to get ideas out onto a page, or in my case, a Minecraft world, I guess. Have this be like the Harbormaster's house, I'm thinking. So, like, brown bed. And have like a chiseled bookshelf. Yeah, torch on top of it, sure. I'll just fill it with a few books. As soon as I can find them. Yeah, there we go. Just simple stuff. That's all it really needs to be. Doesn't necessarily have to all be super duper practical, but it can work. I guess probably where I'm gonna have to start to switch over to flying. So why build this all out in a Minecraft world though? Like, why? What's the point of having a tangible campaign world. And how early should you build it out? Well, what should you do? Personally, I think having your campaign world roughly mapped out, so that way you have a general understanding of like where things are, what things might look like, where things might be, what things look like. It gives you a lot of room to just sort of envision how you can work stories in that space, but you first should sort of have an idea of like what sort of type of story do I want to tell. And I'm planning on making a video about this eventually. I don't necessarily think you should be telling a fantasy story, because the problem is that the fantasy story, it's been overdone. And it's constantly... It's like a constant trope in media. The high fantasy adventure, or the low fantasy adventure, or there's a bunch of different types of fantasy. I'm pretty sure Bob Worldbuilder ended up doing a really good video on that. Yes, I follow a lot of D&D creators. Here's I am a nerd. I got my start into game design by designing Zelda-style dungeons. So yeah, me taking the D&D probably was a surprise to no one. Especially not my dad, who got me into D&D. To a degree. I mean, I got into it at like high school game club. Well, a tabletop game club, not high school actually. I was one of the founding members of the D&D club at my high school. Middle school tabletop game club. We had a bunch of different things. There was one game of D&D that had been going on at the time, and that was sort of just how I got my start. And it wasn't great. It was a little bit awkward and stuff. But we had a good time, and that was what mattered. And I still appreciate having that experience. I don't think I would be doing a lot of different things that I do today had I not had that experience. And so I probably would have met some of my best friends, or at least I wouldn't have gotten as close with some of my friends as I am. But again, getting off topic. This is a problem with me. I will work on it. I'm not really used to making talking style videos. It's gonna be a weird looking build. But we'll work with it. Somehow we'll work with it. I'll figure it out. I mean, it's not the strangest thing I've ever done. I think the main reason I think that you should, if there's a story that you want to tell, fantasy story, whatever, it may be why you should start building out your world first. Don't try and go full on into the nitty-gritty details. That's a bad idea. Yeah, because that's going to be what ends up causing you to burn out. But what I think you should do is start getting some of those ideas out for like what you want the world to be like on paper. Don't get into the full-on history of the world, but start thinking a bit more intentionally about the world that you are as the author, as the game master, as whatever your role is in the story that you want to tell. Start get yourself a jumping off point. Like in the world that you build is a very good place to start with that. Because the world will oftentimes influence the story in more ways than just one. And in more ways than just the inner narrative workings of that world. Well, you'll find that by having a baseline, having an environment, having that, the story ideas of what can I do to fit the story into this environment, into this situation. How might my characters respond to the sorts of things in this situation? What sorts of things in this situation, in this world, are my characters or my players going to have going to be able to potentially encounter and overcome? And that's the benefit to doing a little bit of the world building early. Don't do so much to where you get in over your head and wind up burning yourself out down the line. I've done that my fair share of times myself. It's not fun. I don't recommend it. This does not match. But when you're building out the world, it can really help to sort of have something to visualize it. Give it the sense of, okay, so this is what I'm working with. Whatever that may be, that could be something like a few basic inhabitants, like what sorts of people live there, or what the city is like, or whatnot. Or it could be something a little bit more a little bit more abstract. Okay, I do want this like this. So I just send that with me, and that looks weird. Okay. Gotcha. Effectively, what I'm saying is think about what sorts of stories you want to put into the world that you want to make before fully mapping out the world. But then before you go and try and figure out mapping out every single story, like not the full of the story, start yourself down the road of mapping out the world of figuring out hey, this is the sort of story I want to tell within it. And I think that works especially well for tabletop games, like Dungeons and Dragons, like Blades in the Dark, and all that. Because it gives you it makes you look at your world a bit more in the sense of what stories can I tell with what I've created. It makes you think a little bit more critically about the world design, because your genre can really affect your setting can really affect how you tell your story. Right. Like in a biopunk world, you'll be experimenting with the whole what does it actually mean to be human, and that sort of thing, because biopunk is defined heavily by the genetic engineering aspect. Heck, and going beyond the normal limits of what we as humans should necessarily be, technically speaking, be capable of. And that's sort of the appeal of biopunk. Like that sense of just because we can, does that mean? Well, it doesn't necessarily always mean that we should. But sure, we could give someone the ability to fly or whatnot, or see through walls, but at what point do the trade-offs stop making it worth doing that? If you're catching my drift, I realize it might just sound like rambling. But yeah, I think there's so much more that can be done than just a traditional fantasy story. I think by building out your world, you can sort of go beyond what we view as the norm with storytelling. You don't have to tell a fantasy story where a group of knights is going off to slay a dragon and save the princess. You don't have to tell something within the normal hero's journey, so long as you can fit the 7 main types of characters that actually make stories good, that sort of thing. The whole monomyth structure, which I actually only really learned about recently, because I learned about it through my science and lit class. That's where we've been talking about a lot of different stories and stuff. Often, what makes certain stories good, the other stories bad, that sort of thing. And we discussed the monomyth. We discussed the 7 main types of characters. Well, I say we discussed. We had some learning materials on it. It's an async course, but one of the better async courses that I've had to take. Async courses I have a love-hate relationship with them. Stats in particular. I do not enjoy my stats course for that reason. Yeah, like, you can tell a lot of stories if you have an understanding of the sort of story that you want to tell. It's perfectly possible to be able to tell it. You just sort of have to think, okay, how does the story work within the world that I am saying in it? How can I make this story feel natural for the world that I'm saying in it? And you might have to change the world instead of the story. Yeah, Star Wars is not a sci-fi story, it's a fantasy one, but it works so well because it takes place in a sci-fi setting. That's why we have genres like science fantasy. For those stories that take place in one type of world but follow the storytelling conventions of another. Quick caveat, because I realize the whole Star Wars is not sci-fi can be a little bit controversial. I'm not saying that all Star Wars isn't sci-fi. Attack of the Clones very much is. But there's actually a lot of Star Wars that does not follow. Because Attack of the Clones does the whole thing with, cloning, the ethics of it, should be used in warfare and all that. Meanwhile, the rest of it sort of follows that hero story thing. And we follow Luke Skywalker through the whole thing, and he comes out a different person on the other side. As we, the audience, watch him grow. But it never actually covers, exploring the galaxy, that sort of thing. Sci-fi leans into the science. That's why it's called sci-fi. And Star Wars doesn't really do that. It has sci-fi elements, things that we think of as sci-fi, but it doesn't actually. Well, the sci-fi elements really rarely ever, if at all, have any bearing on the plot, which is why you can say that Star Wars isn't a sci-fi story, because in most cases, it's not. It doesn't actually tell a sci-fi story. But the setting is really important for how that story is told. Well, because of the setting, it feels more like a sci-fi story. It's more believable that it might potentially be, even though it's not. The setting of Star Wars gives it it gives its story that extra bit of dimension that allows us to sort of think of it as a sci-fi classic, even if it's not. Star Wars is iconic because of the dogfights in outer space, but space and all that sort of stuff, like the trench run. And that's an iconic scene. Top Gun Maverick does the exact same thing in the climax of its movie, but the reason why we remember Star Wars is because, oh, this takes place in space. Yes, it uses the saying to its advantage in making the story memorable. Well, it doesn't mean that it necessarily is that genre of the that typically fits with the saying that's it's using, but it makes the story. Well, it makes the story make a much greater impact on us as the viewers. The same thing can apply to your campaign, or for instance, since I'm just gonna plug my own thing, Tales from the Chronicle Enclave. That story does not. Well, it takes place in a fantasy world, but it's not a fantasy story. Or it follows. Well, I mean, it originally started as a fantasy story, but where it is in the storyline now, I would say that it's a sci-fi story because I'm leaning more so, the intention at least, because I realize I haven't really gotten more than just the one episode out so far. The intention is that it's going to follow a lot more of like those sci-fi conventions. And it's going to be talking about the world itself. It's going to be discussing the ethics of containment, of different things that are different than us. Which which admittedly was not. I don't think it was directly inspired by what's going on in today's world, but I guess to some degree it is. I also have plans for it because of Aya's whole wild magic thing. Later on, to actually sort of work in stories that mean something different to me. And to other people like me. More specifically, the whole I don't need to be fixed thing, because that's a common misconception that a lot of people get about people on the spectrum. People like myself. Well, I can't count the number of times I mean, it doesn't happen often, but I've heard it. Well, at least it doesn't happen often anymore to me. It used to happen a lot more often than it does now. But like there would be times in my childhood where people would be like, "Oh, I can tell," and "Oh, can't you fix it?" or something like that. And that's not something that you can fix. It doesn't work that way. But that's a misconception a lot of people have, and it's one that is rather harmful to a lot of people on the spectrum, because it makes them think that there's something wrong with them, that they're broken, and they're not. I want to sort of tell the same sort of thing with Aya and her powers, which some within in the Foundation and within other things would view as a curse, or as dangerous, as something that should be removed if at all possible, something that could potentially be cured. But there isn't a cure for wild magic, just like there isn't a cure for autism or ADHD or anything like that. It's who we are, or it's what we were born with. And we make the most of that. And that's something that not a lot of people understand. and it's a story that I think is a good character to help tell it. Because, well, she's not on the spectrum herself, or maybe she is, I don't know. She falls into the same sort of world. Like this world of, well, it's something that, well, it's the sort of stories that writes itself out as a bit more of a story of self-worth, but not botched at the ending like Captain Marvel was just nuking the guy out of existence. And so, in the whole, well, I don't need to prove anything to you. I'm already good enough. Yeah, sure, but like, you can't just nuke the guy who was criticizing you and expect that to be a good story. Like, actually, it was a genuinely good movie all throughout, and it just failed at the end because she nuked him. Like, I was actually rather invested in the story that was being told, and then boom. It's just like, well, that was an underwhelming finish. I even think the story itself was almost meta-aware of that too, because no, it probably wasn't. Yeah. What I'm trying to say though, when you're writing a story, whether it be for a D&D campaign, whether it be for a book or something along those lines, and it's important to think about the setting thing early on, because the setting can help to really change the way that you view the story when you tell it. It can really make a difference. And for how the story plays out, how the story is perceived. And it can make the story a whole lot stronger if you're willing to go out of your way to make a saying that fits it. It's the reason why, despite not being sci-fi, we think of Star Wars as sci-fi. It's the reason why, despite not being, well, we remember her stories like Guardians of the Galaxy because it's set in space and deals with the whole absurdity of the aliens, and it doesn't take itself too seriously, but it does take itself seriously enough to make us care about Peter and all the other characters. Whereas because it uses the saying as a point of reference for the stories that, well, for the story that wants to be told. Well, you're dealing with a character that has isolation issues. Well, then set them in space where, because of all the aliens, with a bunch of aliens and trying to fit in amongst a wide group, one realizing, hey, we're fine as we are, or we don't have to try and fit in, and we can find our own family amongst them, which is really not doing justice to what Guardians of the Galaxy was, but still, you're getting. Well, hopefully, my point is somewhat getting across that the setting can really make a difference. And it's because it can provide the scene needed for the character development, for the story that you want to tell. Whether that be about some sort of, I don't know, evil wizard or whatnot. Or maybe it's just a whole crew of thieves, like in Blades, that they go and they do stuff. They fight. Well, often they're fighting in the criminal underworld, trying to survive. Maybe that's what the sort of story is going to be. Yeah, maybe it's a story of fighting the odds. Maybe it's a story of redemption. Maybe it's a story of overcoming opposition, which again is also just fighting the odds, I guess. But it could potentially be something entirely different in that regard. Or there's a lot of room. Well, your setting gives you a lot of room to work with when it comes to how you tell your story. And so, I guess the final point that I'm trying to make here is that you shouldn't necessarily go too heavy in detail to what your saying is and all that sort of stuff, because you don't want to burn yourself out too early by trying to make everything and then thinking about the story later. Put some thought into the saying early on too, though. Because it might just allow you to make the story all that richer if you can create one and that pairs well with the setting, and then create the setting to pair well with the story. The two are, well, even if the two are not one and the same, as many people would have you believe, they're just as important to the story as everything within it, genre and setting. With that being said, I hope you like the finished build. And I hope that maybe I could shed some light on world building for you and give you an interesting view into the sort of stuff that goes on in my life. Thank you all so very much for watching. I will see you all next time. Peace out.